we seen that there have been FDA and let's say this: alphabet health agencies. We covered before that they've had members that have quit, particularly in conflict with what's happened with like approval of drugs or it's seeming to be more political based. You know that the FDA, for example, recently it was like 16-2 for I think anybody other than seniors. They were not approving the third booster shot. That in itself created a lot of tension among these alphabet health agencies that are tied to the federal government. And they've been in conflict with the Biden administration because the Biden administration, of course, is saying that boosters are coming. And you got all these crack fiends basically begging for their third booster shot. Whereas some of them are saying, well, we don't know quite yet if this is something that is worth pursuing. So you start to have seen, whether it be through the internal conflict or just coming out, that there are a couple of people that are within these agencies that aren't in line. And I think that is very, very fascinating. Scott Gottlieb, who was the former FDA commissioner, had some things to say about let's talk about the CDC and like some of their recommendations and how they weren't seemingly rooted in science. Let's listen to what he had to say real quick.
And you're right. The 6 feet was arbitrary.
The 6 feet was arbitrary in and of itself. But if the administration had focused in on that, they might have been able to affect a policy that would have actually achieved their outcome. But that policy-making process didn't exist. And the 6 feet is a perfect example of sort of the lack of rigor around how CDC made recommendations. Nobody knows where it came from. Most people assume that the 6 feet of distance, the recommendation for keeping 6 feet apart, comes out of some old studies related to flu, where droplets don't travel more than 6 feet. We now know COVID spreads through aerosols. The initial recommendation that the CDC brought to the White House, and I talk about this, was 10 feet. And a political appointee in the White House said, we can't recommend 10 feet. Nobody can measure 10 feet. It's inoperable. Society will shut down. So the compromise was around 6 feet.
So, and you can see that on CBS News if you want to see like the full deal. What he's talking about is, and we've talked about it before, that 6 feet shit, the social distancing stuff was completely arbitrary, right? Even in places that also were doing some of the recommendations or had their own recommendations, I think U.S. had among like the longest because I think like even the UK, they were only doing like 3 feet or something like that. But it wasn't rooted in anything. It was just something that they gave you to basically say it was like an appease. And I think in some cases the mask did that as well. It wasn't nearly as like still that is a highly debated topic in terms of its effectiveness. And yeah, rightfully so. But what does that tell you about the agencies? What does that tell you about the organizations where they are willing to recommend? And remember, the whole country was flipped on its head based on the recommendations of the CDC guidelines. How many times you walk into a business or the airport or something and they're saying like, according to the CDC, or this business follows CDC guidelines, and the CDC guidelines are fucking arbitrary. Now, this is only now, of course, they're conceding it that it's a wash. It doesn't even make sense. It never was rooted in any science. It was almost given to people as a blanket to make it seem like they were doing something, right? And that's kind of the way we approached a lot of the recommendations that were coming from these public health experts. It wasn't that it was necessarily rooted in science. Like he mentions, like there's no like study that was saying anything about 6 feet being apart and actually proving that. There wasn't referencing that. It was just completely arbitrary. It's just something that they pulled out there. But that is the mindset of a lot of policies from the government. And how it works is that they say, well, doing something is better than doing nothing. So they make it seem, no matter how arbitrary, no matter how it makes sense, it gives you the illusion that you're doing something to help mitigate this or help stop this, definitely the spread, despite it may be ineffective, despite it may even be ascientific. Just putting people under the illusion, and you know I'm right about the mask, that's what a lot of that stuff was, putting people under the illusion that they were doing something. right? So what happens is if you say, okay, this doesn't make sense, or you don't follow that recommendation, and I'm not saying all recommendations are bullshit, but on this topic, if you don't follow their recommendations where you're wanting to get other people sick, you're not doing your part, we're in this together. But if they lied about this, what else did the CDC lie about? Or rather, what other recommendations have been arbitrary? How many more examples do we need to see of these organizations doing this? Here and abroad, WHO as well. Well, we see that they do something, they get it wrong, and maybe they double down, but then they just like, oh, well, we got it wrong, so what? It's not like they're punished for it. It's not like anybody's going to be held accountable for it. But we're still expected to listen to everything it is that they say. And God forbid you disagree. God forbid you have someone else that is also a medical expert with the same expertise, same amount of credentials that says, okay, you're wrong, and this is why. Well, that person's a quack because they didn't come to the conclusion that the CDC or the WHOs or the government organizations wanted them to come to. Therefore, that person must be wrong. See, the science, and this is just another example of it, the science is trademarked. The science, when they say the science, trust the science. It's not actually scientific. It's more of trust the authoritative figures. This whole entire deal has been an appeal to authority. And because we got people don't want to ask questions, maybe because they're afraid, maybe because they're coerced, but they don't want to ask questions. Well, they get away with it. CDC also got caught changing that twice, by the way, changing policies based upon the teachers unions and their like, how the hell the teachers unions have so many recommendations in this regard? And why are we listening to them? Why is the science beholden to the fucking teachers unions? Twice they've changed even the rhetoric to a T based upon what the teachers unions were saying they wanted to happen. We caught them doing that 2 times. And now you get some former current officials that are like, okay, this isn't rooted in science. And maybe it's because of the conflict that's happening with the Biden administration. I'm not saying that's why Scott Gottlieb is saying that. That's not what I'm saying. That. What I'm saying is their word isn't gospel. It never was. But God forbid you point that out. Well, you're a science denier. You just watched a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.